This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations, a show about creativity, innovation, and design. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are live here each and every Sunday, broadcast on more than now 30 stations. We are welcoming Tampa and Fort Myers, Florida, two newest syndicator shows to pick up, radio stations to pick up the show. And in fact, I will be in both Tampa and Fort Myers late next week. So if you're in the area, check us out. I'm actually doing a speech at Florida Poly in Lakewood, and then we'll actually be live on a morning show, and I'll put up more information over at killinnovations.com on the specifics while I'm in Tampa and Fort Myers. Welcoming those two new stations onto the Killer Innovations radio show. So this week we have a special guest. I've been trying to get this person on the show for quite some time. We've been working the schedules. Aaron Walker, if you don't know who Aaron is, he's one of the premier life business coaches out there, based in Nashville, Tennessee. He's got a phenomenal background, but the impact that he's had on people's lives just from the coaching and mentoring and the mastermind groups that he leads and runs is absolutely just phenomenal. And I've been a big fan and have been following his work for quite some time. His book is about done. He and I were laughing prior to the start of the show about the trials and tribulations of being an author. Nobody ever tells you how hard it is to be an author until you actually get in to start writing your first book. So, Aaron, thanks again for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here on Killer Innovations. I greatly appreciate it.
Hey, Phil. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
So, Aaron, for those of my listeners who don't know who you are, give a little bit of background. I mean, you started off as an entrepreneur at 18, and now just to give you a little background, in the last month, I think I've had two of my guests have been under the age of 17 on the show. Wow. Young entrepreneurs who have come up with really great innovations and brought those to market. But you started at 18 with your first job. So give us a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to kind of where you're at today.
I'll give you a quick overview, Phil. I started at 13 working for a local retailer. At 15, fell in love with the business, went to summer school and night school for 18 months, graduated at the beginning of my junior year in high school. I met a couple of guys that had plenty of money because I had zero. I didn't have any money. My dad was a great man, but a horrible business person. And so he said, hey, you got to figure it out. So I did. I met a couple of guys. They own the 21st largest insurance agency in the country. And I approached them and said, let's start a business. And they started laughing. They said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 18. He said, we've not had anybody 18 approach us before. And I said, well, there's a first time for everything. And so after about 6 months of negotiations, we started our first business, and it absolutely was phenomenal. 2 weeks out of high school, when my wife graduated, we got married. 2 weeks out of high school, she came and helped me in the business. And instead of escalating our life standards, we decided to delay gratification. We poured all the money back into the business, and we paid a 10-year loan off, Phil, in 36 months. So here we are, 21 years old. We have a paid-for business. And I just continued to repeat that exercise until I was 27 years old, had four stores. A Fortune 500 company in Fort Worth, Texas, wanted to grow through acquisitions. So they came to Nashville, made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I was done. I sold out. I retired at 27. Well, I thought that was amazing. I thought this is the American dream, go from nothing at 18 to retiring at 27. Until my wife woke me up from a nap one day and she said, you're getting fat and lazy and you need to go back to work. And so I said, well, I don't have any reason to get up, right? There's no purpose. I have no meaning in my life. There's nothing going on. I just got time, and I had a little bit of money. And so I gained 50 pounds in 18 months, and we both decided I need to go back to work. So I went back to the guy I started with, bought his company, spent the next 10 years, and we quadrupled his business in a 10-year period. And it was just an ideal situation. I worked 3 days a week. He worked 3 days a week. And then, Phil, something really horrific happened in August 1st, 2001. I had an automobile accident where I hit and ran over and killed a pedestrian crossing the street. They just didn't see me coming. Very, very unfortunate accident. And it really changed the paradigm shift of my life. I really started thinking more about what I was doing, and I had been very successful in a number of businesses, and I decided to retire. And so I did. 41 years old, I was finished again for the second time. And I took 5 years off, kind of got my legs back under me, figured out what I was doing. Went in the construction industry, spent the next 9 years building high-end residents. And then I retired at 50. And a couple of my mastermind buddies, Dave Ramsey and Dan Miller and Ken Abraham, Jeff Mosley, some of those guys that are here in Nashville, encouraged me to coach. And I refused it at first, but then after prompting, they encouraged me. And so I did. And now we have national and international clients. We lead 7 mastermind groups. We have hundreds of guys in our community. And Phil, I'm having more fun today than I've ever had in my entire life. There's 38 years in 3 minutes.
That's probably the most condensed backgrounder I've had on the show yet. But you've had kind of very distinct little phases in your life, both early success, some struggles, with the accident that happened in 2001, and then kind of this coming back and getting back into the saddle again. If you were to look back today, what you know today, and you were going to advise the 18-year-old Aaron Walker negotiating your first deal, what would be kind of one or two pieces of advice you would give to your 18-year-old version of yourself?
Yeah, a couple of things. Oftentimes people, they're held back by fear. And really, I had nothing to lose, right? Because I talked to my mom and she said, hey, go for it because you've got nowhere to go but up. And so that's exactly what I did. But I tell people now, don't let fear hold you back. Fear of missing an opportunity more than you fear failure. And if you will always keep that at the forefront of your minds, oftentimes we think our peers or colleagues are talking about us or our family members. Well, failure is in not trying, not in not succeeding. And so I would hate to lay there in bed at night and think, would it have worked? I would rather, it not work out exactly like I'd planned. I don't even believe in failure, first of all. I believe you either succeed or you learn. And you just take those things that you learn and make different application and just continue forward. So I would do that. The second thing I would do is I would remove the word can't from my vocabulary. My mom had a saying when I was a child, can't, couldn't do it, and could did it all. And I've adopted that as my lifelong mantra. Everything that I go after, I feel like I can do it. It's a mindset shift. Carol Dweck talks about it in her book, Mindset. We have a growth or a fixed mindset, and I choose to have a growth mindset. Your point about fear is one that I hear a lot about from our listeners. I've got this great idea, but what if it doesn't work out? And it's the way I kind of sometimes frame it is that's false evidence that appears real. Sure.
It's we have this innate ability to make something sound a lot worse than it ever possibly could be, and it does. It really does hold us back. I really like your point about can't. It also is one that I think we constantly have to remind ourselves because we all get caught into that trap. Something's not quite working out as planned, and it does fall in, and the fear becomes becomes that issue. So Aaron, when did you, from the standpoint of when you sold your last business and you tried to retire until your mastermind guys, when did you start that? When did you start your coaching business? I'm trying to remember when that was.
Yeah, I retired when I turned 50 6 years ago, and then I took about an 18-month break. I've retired more than the law allows. That's what my wife says. Nobody deserves to retire 3 times. And I said, I didn't retire. I just took a little break, had to refocus. And then Dan Miller said to me one day, Dan has 48 days to the work you love. And he said, what are you going to do now? And he said, you've been successful at all these businesses. And he said, "You're 50 years old, so what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to fish, I'm going to hunt, I'm going to play golf." He said, "You know what? That'll last about 90 days, just like it has for you twice before." He said, "Man, you got to have meaning and purpose. You got to have a reason to get up. You're a young guy. And you need to get after it." And Dave Ramsey told me the same thing. He said, "Man, there is no way you're going to sit still." He said, "Come and do Entree Leadership Mastery Series as my guest." And Phil, I went there and absolutely had a blast. It was amazing. And then I went and did Innovate at Dan's place. And he texted me on the way home. We all live real close to each other. And he texted me on the way home and he said, "Aaron, people were leaning in, listening." He said, "You need to coach."
Yeah. Yeah, believe me, you talk about retiring. I think it was Fast Company named me the Brett Favre of technology because I've retired. I've attempted to retire so many times. We're going to take this quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Aaron Walker to continue our conversation on his background, his experience, but also about life and business coaching. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are a show about innovation, creativity, and design here each and every Sunday. Podcast comes out on Tuesday mornings. You can check that out over on iTunes or wherever you get your regular podcast shows. As always, all the show notes are available over at killerinnovations.com. All the links and materials, resource materials that we talk about here on the show, you can find all that available out there. So if you're listening in a car, do not try to take the notes. You can always go to Killer Innovations and grab them there. So today's special guest, Aaron Walker, we were talking in the first segment, getting a little bit of Aaron's background and how he kind of transition from starting being an entrepreneur at the age of 18, spending, up until he turned 50, buying, selling, and growing quite successful businesses. And then kind of went through this transition of really bringing that experience that he had through the ups and downs of both of his business and personal life and turning that into both a life and as a business coach with his new company, which is View from the Top. So what I want to talk about specifically is there's a lot of life coaches out there. There's a lot of business coaches out there, but you kind of set the mold for what you refer to as both a life and a business coach.
Right.
Why did you go about it that way versus what everybody else is out there doing in the coaching space?
Yeah, we kind of niche down, Phil, in our industry, and I coach men. And the reason I coach men is I've been involved in men's groups and accountability groups and mastermind groups with men now for over 30 years. And since I'm an entrepreneur, it was difficult to separate for me business and life, right? I am the company. I've not worked for anybody since I was 18. And for me to go home and take off, my business hat and put on my life hat or my daddy hat or husband hat, it was difficult. And I couldn't understand that. And a lot of men I talk to, there's not a distinct division in that. And I said, well, I'm going to coach men 27 to 55 years old on average, entrepreneurs, small business owners. And our niche market is guys that'll do, $1 million a year up to $50 million a year. And that's kind of our niche market. And so I want to instruct people that you can't really separate the two. You just can't become something different outside of you being an entrepreneur. They just integrate. And so I just decided to be a life and business coach to coach those entrepreneurs.
Well, again, I think it is unique, and it's one that I also strongly agree with. It's hard to, segment out, like you said, your personal life and your business life. They influence both directions,
Right.
Both positively and negatively if we're not careful, right?
And here's the thing I wanted to do, Phil. I wanted to teach people that I can teach you to make money. It's not that hard to make money. It's really not that difficult. And I can make more of it. I can lose it. But I only have one family. I only have one opportunity with the children. And the office doesn't have a memory, but your family does. And I said, if you're going to err on the side of being a great husband, a great dad, don't miss those practices. Don't miss those ball games. Don't miss those one-time events. Just for the sake of making more money. And I said, what'll happen one day, you'll come home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers. And when that happens, ultimately, you're still a loser.
Yes.
And I don't want you to be a loser. I want you to be all encompassing. I want you to be a great entrepreneur, great husband, great dad, great civic, great in the community. Those are the things that I want you to do. And I teach people how to live successful and significant lives simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes do make that mistake where it's got to be one or the other. You've got to prioritize one or the other. And you and I were talking actually during the commercial break about the challenges of prioritization and our own experiences. And there's a podcast that was done, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 years ago in the archive, where I shared. One of the guests or one of the listeners asked me about my prioritization scheme, right? And mine's pretty simple, 5S. It's faith, family, friends, fitness, and finances is the end. And I've just found over my life through a lot of mistakes, and believe me, I've made them all, that, don't put the finances in the front end, put it at the back end. And if you take care of everything else, the finances, amazingly enough, takes care of itself.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And my good friend Rory Vaden wrote a book called Procrastinate on Purpose. And he talks about in the book of priority dilution. And we can't manage time, right? There's no way to do that. What we have to do is decide what's important. And my 5Fs are just the same, my faith and then family, fitness, I'm like you, then finances is at the end. So they're very similar in nature. And if you get those and you get them in the right priority, you're right, the finances will take care. The thing is we need to concentrate a lot of our effort and energy. Greg McCowan wrote the book Essentialism, and he talks about in that book, we can't do 15 things well. You don't have the bandwidth. And so you've got to narrow down. Instead of being an inch deep and a mile wide, we need to concentrate, be an inch wide, but a mile deep. And then people will stand in line to buy your services or your product. But we don't niche down far enough. We don't specialize. And when we're talking to the world, we're talking to no one. And so we really, really have to get specific in what we're trying to accomplish, as well as we do at home. You just can't do everything. So you've got to pick wise at the beginning.
Exactly. And it is that challenge of how do you make sure that you don't take your eye off that prioritization, because it's really easy to do, right? My case, I'll chase the shiny object. And so that's the thing that I've had to teach myself, is not to chase what sometimes gets viewed as that shiny object.
Can I give a tip that will help with that?
Sure thing. Share away.
Dan Miller taught me 15 years ago. He said, start scheduling your events on your calendar, because the things that get put on your calendar get done. And so right now, I know the books I'm going to read for the remainder of the year. I know the themes I'm going to do. I know the blogs I'm going to write. I know exactly everything I'm going to do. And it's dated in my calendar all the way through December. When the shiny object comes along, I look at my list, my calendar. If it's not on there, somebody's going to make money and be successful at it. It's just not going to be me. And that way I stay focused to the task.
Well, I think it also ties back to, people have this fear that if they don't do something that they're going to miss out. Yeah. Right? I'm going to miss that opportunity. That could be my big opportunity. And the fact is, we are an opportunity-rich world. There's going to be more opportunities
They're everywhere.
For you and everywhere. It's not like it's this fleeting thing that you got to go, grab or whatever. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. But before we go, I wanted to share with the listeners, again, check out the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. I will be in Tampa, Florida, and Fort Myers. 2 new stations have picked up the show, so I'll be down there next week meeting with them. I'm actually doing a speech at Florida Poly. If you are in the Florida area and you want to come out and listen, it's about a 20-year future view of technology and technology trends, what's coming next. So feel free to check it out. You can go over to philmckinney.com, and you'll see all of my speaking engagement schedules are posted there. So With that, we're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. This is a show about innovation, creativity, and design, live each Sunday. The podcast comes out Tuesday morning. You can grab that over on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast content. The show's been going on for 12 years. We're about halfway through our 12th season. So if you want, yes, you can go back and you can listen to show number 1, me sitting in a bathroom at a Marriott hotel in Phoenix, Arizona, 12 years ago as a test. I didn't know quite that the test was going to go on for 12 years and now be a nationally syndicated radio show. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day to come and join us here on the show. Today's special guest, Aaron Walker, long successful history and career as an entrepreneur, starting at the age of 18, and then now providing sharing his experiences, his expertise, his guidance, his coaching, his mentoring as a life and a business coach. And we were talking in the last segment really about that transition of sometimes your friends persuade you to take a step and go in a different direction that you never thought you would take, and how Aaron ended up in this role. But I think in some cases, some of the listeners may not be totally familiar with, for instance, one of the things you provide is you've got these mastermind groups where you bring together 10 people. So maybe you want to give us just a little bit of background for the listeners who aren't really intimately familiar with mastermind groups, how you run them, what do they do, and what's been kind of your experience? Because you were in a mastermind group for a very long time before you even started running your own.
Right. Yeah. So I was at a concert here in Nashville, and Dave Ramsey came up to me. He was on one radio station at the time, offered me advertising. I turned him down. He finally gave me free advertising. And then I've been a 21-year sponsor of his show. And he came up to me 3 years after that, and he said at this concert, and he said, "Listen, I want you to join my mastermind." I said, "What in the world is that?" And he goes, "Just trust me." So I went to his office, 10 other guys there. We're sitting around a conference table in Dave's office. And quite honestly, Phil, it was a little uncomfortable at first, because I didn't know any of these guys except Dave. And so I'd go and we'd read books, we'd share, we'd talk, and I go back the next Wednesday for an hour and a half. We'd do it again. And it transformed my life. And I won't give you the 20-year version, but what transformed my life was subjecting myself to the scrutiny of men that had nothing to gain or lose as a result of what they told me. And I found out that I got very, very pointed truth as a result of it. And I can't tell you, man, the fights and arguments and disagreements that we've had in those groups, but it's taken my life to the next level. Well, when I retired at 50, I wanted to copy that and do it for other men. So we started Iron Sharpens Iron, just as one man sharpens another, as iron sharpens iron. We started encouraging people to join our mastermind group. Well, we filled up the first group like immediately, second group, third group. Now we have 7 groups. We meet in an internet conference room called Zoom, as we're on now in this. And we have men from all over the world that come together for an hour. We have themes that we have each month, like how to be authentic. And we'll read a book that goes along with that. We have an accountability tool that you fill out every single week online. 10 top priorities. You rank yourself, and we hold you accountable to your objection, the things that you want to accomplish, the goals that you're trying to reach. And then we get in there. It's a very safe environment. We sign NDAs, non-disclosures, where people can come with new ideas and concepts. And it's just a very, very safe environment. Listen, isolation is the enemy of excellence, right? And we need to be in community. And this provides a safe environment to do that.
And so the the structure of our mastermind group is, I've seen it where you kind of have the man in the middle, where one person shares their, their challenge.
Right.
The other people respond or provide advice or whatever. And then you've got the accountability piece, and then you've got kind of the the building up, I guess.
Right.
Edification piece.
Encouragement. Right.
Is that kind of, it sounds like a pretty standard mastermind structure then.
Yeah, well, it's the place that you go and get all the resources you need. We're connectors. We connect people all over the world. Like, hey, Phil, you need to meet Billy or Eddie. He can help you with that. If this is the technology that you need, we help you get that. And then we hold you accountable. The 50% of it is the accountability, because you don't want to come in there week after week not having done the things you said you were going to do. Nobody wants to do that. As a result of that, you become successful, right? Because we hold you accountable to it. And then it's just a very useful resource that helps you. It's a safe place. It gives you resources and connections.
And then also you have a community group too, right? So you take the people who maybe can't make the time commitment or whatever, you actually bring them together as kind of as an online community. So then the community is kind of helping each other then through that process.
Well, then we have a secret Facebook that they communicate in. All the people that are in the mastermind groups are in the community as well. Every Wednesday, we interview a noted authority, an author, celebrity. We have all kind of people that we interview. We do what's called man in the middle, where we'll interview somebody and we'll take the task that they're trying to accomplish, or problems that they're trying to overcome. And then we all jump in as a community. The resources, very similar to the mastermind, but it's not an in-person, or it's not video meetup. It's through the Facebook and it's through the interviews.
Right. So you talked about the fact that you do this bringing in authors and noted experts on the interview process. You've started a business where you actually help experts, authors, particularly new authors of books, to get on the podcast. Now, just to make sure the listeners understand, we didn't use that company as part of, of Aaron. Aaron and I had reached out through and had been exchanging, and we got on the phone a couple times just as acquaintances. And I'm trying to remember exactly how we got introduced to each other, but the networks work, right? There's someone's going to refer. But now you this is pretty innovative from the standpoint that you went out and you've been on a lot of shows, right? You've been on a lot of podcasts. And now you're actually helping other people who may be struggling, trying to figure out how do they get onto a show, onto the more popular shows. How do they happen? So talk back, 'cause I think this is pretty innovative. So how did you go from, getting yourself on these shows just from the standpoint of sharing your expertise to now helping others?
Yeah. So when I started coaching 3.5 years ago, I wanted to market my business. And one guy told me one day, he goes, you need to start getting on podcasts. And I said, I'm not that familiar with podcasts. And he said, well, there's a couple of name shows you need to try to get on. So I did. And I went out and I got on the show. And from there, other people started inviting me. And I thought, man, these guys are getting 50,000, 100,000, million, 2 million downloads a month. And they're evergreen. Now there's show notes, which has SEO value. You could type in Aaron T. Walker 3.5 years ago in Google and I didn't show up. Now you can do it. I'm the first 10 pages. And the reason is because of the show notes, the SEO benefit of that. Plus the interview is evergreen. Yeah. So I'm getting clients from 3.5 years ago off of shows I've done. Past 24 months, I've done 260 podcast interviews. Well, a lot of people have seen that and they said, man, this is really working well for you. I mean, we're really taking our business to the next height. So we wrote a program telling people how to do it. And then out of that was birthed interviewvalet.com, where it's a concierge white glove service where we take someone that don't know at all how to get on podcasts. We do their pitch sheet. We do their landing page, their social media marketing. We schedule the interview and the vertical that they need to be on, and we get them booked. We even give them the equipment if they need it in order to sound like a pro. And so they don't have to do anything but the interview, Phil, and it is absolutely blowing up because of the value of being on podcasts. So it's interviewvalet.com.
Yeah, I was telling you, we were talking about it before we started the show, that we're now in the 12th season, right? So I have to remind people I was podcasting before iTunes and I was podcasting before the iPhones.
A long time.
A long time. And now everybody wants to do a podcast. And some of the newer podcasts are just absolutely amazing. Good Media is doing some great work. Tim Ferriss's show is phenomenal. So we're going to take a quick commercial break here. And when we come back, Aaron, I've got to ask you one question and let you prepare for it during the commercial break, which is, what's the best piece of advice you could leave the listeners? You've been coaching and mentoring men for quite some time. What's the one piece of advice that you would give somebody to really drive ultimate success in their business lives and in their personal lives? So I'm going to let you stew on that for a little bit during the commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up on continue our conversation with Aaron Walker. So stay right there. Don't go anywhere. Again, I'll be in Florida next week. If you're in the area, check out over at philmckinney.com. You'll see my speaking schedule and come out and say hi. And like I said, stay right there. Be right back. We're going to take this quick commercial break. You're listening to Innovations on Biz Talk Radio.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here each Sunday, show about innovation, creativity, and design. However, before we jump back into the show, I want to thank the sponsor for this week's show, which is TopTal. Now, if you've been a long-time listener to the show, you're probably saying, hold on, Phil, 12 years, you've never had a sponsor for the show. And I'll explain why we're doing it here in just a minute. Give me a second here. A common ask that I get from you, the listeners of the show, is really around, you've got this really great idea, now how do you make it real? You may not have technical expertise, you may not have design expertise. And we've had people from all those backgrounds on the show, and people have always gotten very interested in how do you find that kind of talent. And that's what TopTal does. TopTal goes out and pre-screens the absolute best technical and design talent out there. In fact, albeit on their website, they advertise that only 3% of the top technical and design talent that apply ever make it into TopTal. It actually works out to be about 1.6%. So their screening process, their bar is very high. So if you do a project using the TopTal resources, you're guaranteed to have the A team. You're not getting the B team. You're not getting the C team. These are absolutely people who are top notch. We've had the CEO for TopTal has been on the show long before they even became a sponsor. So because I liked what they were doing, I liked their structure, I liked the approach that they used. And a lot of companies are using them. Large companies such as Pfizer and JP Morgan use TopTal, all the way down to startups like Zendesk and Airbnb use them. And in fact, many of the startup companies at Y Combinator and the incubators and the accelerators that are out there use TopTal as the resources behind the founders to help the founders take that idea and turn it into a reality. So TopTal has come in to sponsor the show and has a special offer, which is you try them out, you have a project, you work with TopTal. If after 2 weeks they aren't just absolutely killing it, you get your money back and you get to keep the deliverables. So you can't go wrong. So check them out. Go over to toptal.com/Phil. You can click in and start your project, or you can just send me an email, phil@killerinnovations.com. I'll make a personal introduction to Nelson and the team there, and you'll get taken care of. Now, why am I having a sponsor for the show now after 12 years? One is that I just believe in what TopTal is doing. Secondarily, I've been funding the show and that out of my pocket for the last 12 years. With TopTal coming in, the money that I take from TopTal helps cover the cost of the show, but I actually take that money and we pass it off to the nonprofits, both Pioneer Education and Hacking Autism, which if you're a longtime listener, you know about both of those nonprofits and the fact that all of the author royalties from the books. If you buy anything from innovation.tools, the store here, 100% of the profits from the store also go to the nonprofits. So TopTal is partnering with us in support of the nonprofits, and we greatly appreciate that. So let's get back into the show. So Aaron, as we were leaving the last segment, I gave you the task of coming back with, the best piece of advice you could give the listeners here on how to have a real impact, and a piece of advice that would have a real impact on their lives. So what would be that top advice that you would give them?
Yeah, hands down, it's building relationships. And I've done that since I was 18 years old, and we've been very methodical about doing it, very intentional about doing it. I would suggest first and foremost to read Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I flew out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and coached a client of mine, and I said, I want you to go schedule a breakfast, lunch, or dinner with 3 clients a week. But here's the thing, you can't ask them for business. And he said, you're crazy. And I said, just trust me. So he went in, got to know him a little bit better. He called me 2 weeks later and he said, hey, I got a $125,000 job out of that conversation. I said, you just keep doing what I'm telling you every single week, 3, coffee, lunch, or dinner with somebody. Called me about 2 weeks later and he said, I got a $400,000 subdivision. This guy was in the excavation business. I said, you just keep doing what I'm telling you. So 6 or 8 weeks go by and he calls me laughing one day. He said, I can't do all the work. And I said, it's because you're building relationships. You stopped trying to make the sale and you started adding value. And you need to continue to build relationships, connect people on a daily basis. I sit down in front of my computer and I'll do endorsements for people by video, and I'll send it to them without them asking me for it. Or I'll connect people before they ask to be connected. We're very deliberate. We're very intentional on building relationships. And take the old customers you've got and get that list out and do what I'm telling you. Go build the relationship. Don't ask them for business. Do it with your current clients and do it with potential clients. And if you will spend time developing a relationship, the business will come.
That's a great piece of advice. That is very good. That's very good. So in this case, you've got your clients. You actually work with a large number of clients with your community and people reaching out to you. How do you actually go through the whole process of kind of supporting and filtering them? You shared some of that materials with me, which is, kind of the survey pieces here, which I found very interesting.
There's 2 things that I use every day. One is called a personal assessment, to where we really dive into your identity, your ideals, your career, your faith, your family. The second one is what do I want? Most people don't live their life proactively, they live reactively. And I ask people every day, if there were no financial or geographic limitations, tomorrow morning when you get up, what would you do with your life? Most people don't know. I've made these available for free. I've taken the price off. If you'll go to viewfromthetop.com/killer innovations, all in lowercase letters, those 2 documents are there for you for free. And you can live your life very successfully and very significant using these documents.
Hey, Aaron, I really appreciate that. And we will have those links in the show notes. So if you forget the URLs, we will make those available to you. We'll also have links to all of Aaron's contact information. So find him over at viewfromthetop.com, and also his LinkedIn page and Facebook page also with that. Hey, Aaron, I want to thank you very much for joining us here Sunday on the Killer Innovations, and look forward to actually having you back on the show when your book comes out so that we can take that out. So again, thanks for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here on Killer Innovations. Check out the show notes, check out the archive, subscribe to the show over on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. You get it every week then. One thing that I would ask is just hop over to iTunes and give us a rating and a review. That helps us a lot here on the show to get some more visibility. And we will be here next Sunday, same place. Join us every Sunday here on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you very much. Talk to you next week.
Thanks,
The
Phil.
opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. biztalkradio.com.